So errors cannot exactly exist in purely subjective phenomenon. I mean, if I like a painting, or let's say something even simpler, I like the color blue. Blue is my favorite color. One is the loneliest number. Blue is my favorite color. Can someone tell me that I'm incorrect in preferring blue? Well, no, because it's a subjective preference. There's really no incorrectness in a subjective preference. I like, I don't know, what's a food that I really like? I like pasta. And nobody can tell me you're incorrect, like you're wrong. But if I say pasta is made of fish, well, then I'm making a truth or an objective statement, not a subjective preference, but a statement of fact. If I say Cairo is the capital of Scotland, then I'm making not a subjective preference, but an objective fact statement. Now, if it turns out that Cairo is not the capital of Scotland, can I rationally say Cairo is mistaken, Scotland is mistaken, geographers are mistaken, the internet is well, the internet is often mistaken, but I can't say that the mistake is in reality. When I make an objective truth statement claim, the only possibility is that I am correct or I am incorrect. Right? In other words, error exists only within the mind, which is why evidence trumps eyewitness accounts. Right? I mean, that's just the basic reality of, and that's why in science, empirical testing is the final proof or disproof of a hypothesis or a theory. Right? You say something and then you test it, and if the test proves you false, your theory is incorrect. You don't get to say, well, reality is mistaken, my theory is true, my theory is correct. Like if I say a brick should bounce as much as a basketball, or if I say a basketball will drop against a hard surface and bounce higher than its original position, well, that would be incorrect because some of the energy is dissipated in the impact against the hard surface. So if I say a brick and a basketball will bounce the same height, I drop the two together and the brick kind of sits on the ground and the basketball bounces, I don't get to say, well, the brick is mistaken, my theory is correct. I mean, I can say that, I would just be wrong. So these are very, very important principles for unraveling confusion and sophistry and error in your mind. Error occurs only in the mind, and first principles tell us whether we're correct or incorrect. And correctness or incorrectness in general references empirical or objective reality, measurable reality in some manner. So there are two principles, two first principles, since what we are doing when we philosophize in general is we are attempting to describe objective principles or things or events or whatever. Then there are two principles. Since what we're trying to do is describe reality, there are two principles which reality embodies. The first is rational consistency, logical consistency. So the famous syllogism, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Well, that is actually a description of biological reality, right? All men are mortal. Walt Disney popsicle accepted, but all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates must be mortal. That is a description of biological reality. So the first thing that is, and reality itself is rational and consistent, which is why buildings stay up, why the laws of physics are universal, and why things can be described 100 million light years or more away, because laws of physics are universal. They describe the behavior of matter, the effects and properties of matter and energy, and if a scientific theorem is put forward, a hypothesis is put forward that says the same matter in the same circumstances will behave in opposite ways at the sense level. I mean, subatomic level, things get pretty freaky, but philosophy deals with the sense level. So if I say, well, a ball that I bounce in Tel Aviv will like a ball that I drop, a rubber ball that I drop on a hard surface will bounce back up in Tel Aviv, but in Philadelphia it will go through the floor as if the floor didn't exist. This would be inconsistent behavior under pretty much the same circumstances. You would get opposite results, which would be invalid. because the laws of physics are universal. So the first thing we need for truth, the first principle, is rational consistency. Now, rational consistency is a necessary but not sufficient standard for truth, for validity. So, if I say an elephant is living and swimming in the interplanetary space between Earth and Mars, that is not possible. I mean, for reasons that we don't have to get into in much detail here. There's no air. Whales are mammals. They breathe air. There's no air pressure. Therefore, the body would expand. You could go on and on, right? So that we know can't be true. Can't be true. There's a famous sort of argument from Bertrand Russell, Lord Russell, who says that you could say, well, there's a teacup floating somewhere beyond the orbit of Mars or something like that, and there's no reason to believe that there is. But that at least would not be impossible. If I said that an animal exists that is both an elephant and an amoeba at the same time, we would not need to hunt all over the universe for an animal that was both those things, because it can't exist. Now, if I say a unicorn could exist, well, unicorns, stripping them of their magical powers, like a horse with a horn, yeah, it could exist somewhere out there in the universe. Yeah, of course. It's not a self-contradictory entity. But if I say a unicorn exists that is both fire and ice simultaneously, and is both a reptile and a mammal and an amphibian simultaneously, we would not need to hunt the universe over to know that such a self-contradictory entity could not exist. If I say somewhere in the universe is a square circle, well, we don't need to hunt all over the universe to find out whether that's true or not. Now, if I say a non-magical unicorn cannot exist, then I'm making an invalid claim, because then you would need to hunt the universe and so on, and you'd never figure it out, because by the time you got to the end of the universe, so much evolution would have passed that you might have to go back to the beginning and start looking again. I mean, you simply could never establish that, so you would never make that as a valid claim or truth statement. So logical consistency is what is necessary, because logically contradictory entities cannot exist, do not exist. To say that something is logically contradictory is to say that it does not exist. In reality, it may exist in your imagination. I guess you could imagine a unicorn that was both fire and ice simultaneously. But, or if you said there's an entity that exists, an animal that exists, that has matter but is immune to gravity, well, this would be false. This could not happen, because the definition of matter is that gravity is one of its properties. And that which is immune to gravity does not exist, because existence is, materially, existence is being subject to gravity. So rational consistency, logical consistency is the first requirement, necessary but not sufficient. Means it could happen, could be true, doesn't mean it is true. So that's the first principle, rational consistency. And you see this in mathematics, you see this in engineering, you see this in physics, you see this in biology, that if people put forward arguments that are logically self-contradictory, they are dismissed without appeal to evidence. Right? So if I were charged with some crime, I was charged with shoplifting, say, and the shoplifting happened at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Yet at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, I was kissing my wife on the kiss cam at some major sporting event with 20,000 people watching. They would not investigate and look for my fingerprints and look for, because it's not possible, of course, to be in two places at the same time. Therefore, because it is rationally impossible for me to be shoplifting and kissing my wife on the kiss cam at the same time, then I would have an airtight alibi. I would not be charged with a crime because it's impossible. You then would not proceed to testing for empirical evidence. You wouldn't go down to the store and say, well, did you see that guy here? You wouldn't dust for fingerprints, and if found, would prove that I was there at that time. Anything. You simply wouldn't. It would be airtight alibi. He's off. He's not a suspect. Never going to happen. Couldn't happen. So the first test is rational consistency. Once rational consistency is passed, then you go for empirical evidence. So any theory which denies the possibility of rational consistency and or empirical evidence has nothing to do with philosophy. It would be in the realm of sophistry or superstition or irrationality or culture or whatever it is. And so when someone says, I know this is true, this is valid, this is factual, you should prefer truth over falsehood and so on, those are in the realms of philosophy. And being in the realm of philosophy, they are subject to rational consistency and empirical evidence. Any entity which fails the test of rational consistency is identical with non-existence. And even if something has rational consistency, if it cannot be empirically observed, it is in a state of unproven potential existence, right? If I say I have a car, or you don't know me, I say I have a car, well, you may believe me, you may not believe me, but that doesn't prove that I have a car if I say that I have a car. Now, if I say I have a car that is both a comet and a car and an ugly shirt and a horse at the same time, you don't say like, well, maybe, maybe that's a new model that I haven't heard about. You wouldn't say that at all. You would know that I did not have such a thing because it's rationally inconsistent. Couldn't have all those properties at the same time. So first principles means accepting that error exists within the mind and error is corrected in statements that we make about reality with reference to the properties of reality, which are objective, empirical, rationality. Got to be rational. If it's rational, it might be true. If it's empirically valid, then it becomes true. So I hope that helps. This is, again, if you want more, there's an 18-part Introduction to Philosophy series right here on YouTube or in the Free Domain Radio feed. You can go and check those out. Please help out the show to continue to spread its message of philosophy, our message of philosophy out throughout the world. We really need your help to survive and thrive. So please go to freedomainradio.com/donate and help a brother out. Thank you so much.